So Marjorie Taylor Greene's going through some things, folks. She's having a rough couple of years. Recently, I think she's in the middle of a divorce, but she chose the most awkward language to discuss doing a good old-fashioned new Confederacy. And here's Joy Reid relentlessly mocking her.
So the very bad map we see at every presidential election showing huge swaths of red, I mean, it's flawed and a myth because land doesn't vote, people do. The reality is we are a nation not divided by states, but rather by counties. It's one reason Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for secession. I'm
going to let Joy Reid do her thing because she's got a great speech here, but I do want to look at that map again real quick. That is one of the worst pieces of propaganda. We really should. Oh my God! It was MIT, USA Today analysis. Okay, it's just poor presentation because it does such a bad job of showing the reality. All right, I'm off my soapbox.
Divided by states, but rather by counties. It's one reason Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for secession isn't just inconceivable as well as foolish. It would be disastrous for Republican voting states. An analysis of the 2020 election by the Brookings Institution showed that Biden's winning base in 500 counties, just 500 counties, encompassed 71% of America's economic activity, while Trump's losing base of 2,500 counties represented just 29% of the economy. And that's because blue states tend to be urban and suburban with large populations, while red counties tend to be smaller, more rural, and sometimes with more cows and corn stalks than people. Economically, it's not even a fair fight. Joining me now are MSNBC political analysts Matthew Dowd and Cornel Belcher. And Matthew, I want to go to you first. This sort of fetish for secession, I remember Sarah Palin's husband was sort of indulging in it. These red state folks keep saying it, but they don't understand the economics of it would really be awful for red states. The states that are the most dependent on the federal government to keep their economies alive are almost all red states: Alaska, Mississippi, Kentucky, West Virginia, Montana, New Mexico, Arizona, Louisiana, Indiana, Alabama. Only New Mexico is a blue state. The least federally dependent states, almost all blue states. Blue states are the donor states: California, Colorado, Massachusetts, you can go on, Illinois, Delaware, New Jersey, et cetera. Why do they keep indulging in this?
Because they don't care about the economic implications of it. I mean, I think that's fundamental to what they're doing and what they've not done in Washington, D.C. What they care about is the cultural implications of this. That's what they fundamentally care about, because they have a singular culture they want to establish. And since they can't do it as the United States as a whole, they want to do it state by state.
We are in a culture war because their culture is trash. Not people from red states, not people from Trump voting areas. The Trump voters have a trash culture. And I just mean if you poke around, from time to time, God help me, I got to get my hands dirty and hang out in these crowds to talk to them. Without fail, it's the same jokes over and over. My pronouns are gun, truck. I don't know why I did Hank Hill just then, but Hank would never be a MAGA voter, per Mike Judge's say-so. But, yeah, they do the same jokes over and over, and it's all based around pushing others down, not building anything up. And if there's lip service paid to building something up, it's usually something not tangible, like praise for Jesus Christ. Look, if you enjoy Jesus Christ, cool. Good on you. But that's not like there's not a chart for that, you know? And they don't underestimate what a powerful thing it is. Because notice what Joy Reid said in the early part of that. I'm not going to go back to the whole thing. I'm just going to move this slightly off. 70% of the wealth is coming from blue voting areas. How does that? We know the reality. We know that a lot of that wealth is tied up with people that then turn around and donate it to both parties, but more so to Republicans. But how does it look if you don't really follow politics and you don't dive into this regularly? And in fact, when you do dive into it, you only get a bunch of conspiracy nonsense. How does it look to somebody in a red area? It does look like wealthy elites. When they look at that garbage map, I will go back to the part we were at, but when they look at that garbage map, oh, steady hand. And they are aware of some number like there's 70% of the wealth tied up in the blue areas, and then they get another sheet that shows them, for example, like I've presented to you, that the richest among us now hold a greater share of the wealth. The conclusion they arrive at is the kind of conspiracy nonsense that we have to constantly fight against. Like there's a cabal of yada, yada, yada. That's why that kind of conspiracy is able to grow. We are going to, unfortunately, have to fight nonsense with facts, but they are not going to hear anything we have to say until they have seen people suffer consequences for their actions. Because right now they see that, and when a lefty starts talking, they shut down entirely.
Blue states are the donor states. California, Colorado, Massachusetts, you can go on, Illinois. Why do they care
about the economic implications of it? I mean, I think that's fundamental to what they're doing and what they've not done in Washington, D.C. What they care about is the cultural implications of this. That's what they fundamentally care about, because they have a singular culture they want to establish. And since they can't do it as the United States as a whole, they want to do it state by state. The other thing,
and there is my point. They care about the culture because that's what they're trained to do. That's how that's the fight the GOP is comfortable with their voters having. Because cultural things are harder to pin down, they're harder to measure. And you can take something, I just bit the hell out of my tongue. And you could take something like that map and turn it into a culture war real easy.
Found it peculiar that she used this term divorce in this process. And sometimes, as we know, that in a divorce, sometimes the person falls in love with somebody else or another individual and wants out. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene has fallen in love with another country. That happens to be Russia in the course of this. And she likes what's going on in Russia far more than what she likes going on here in the United States. She likes Putin's brand of leadership far more than she likes Joe Biden's brand of leadership.
Maybe more than she likes Trump's brand of leadership.
And so that's what I think this is fun. It's a cultural, this is not an economic concern of theirs. This is a cultural concern of theirs. And it fundamentally doesn't understand what it means to be in the United States of America. United States of America. They have no concept of what this means in history. And to me, the shots at Fort Sumter that started the Civil War, we're long past that here in this country right now, because they've jumped already to the place where they want a separate country so they can establish their cultural monotheistic way they want in America.
It's rare that I temper something that somebody on corporate media said, but nah. I mean, okay, maybe you could call January 6th the Fort Sumter. But was it really? It was I feel like that's a bit much.
But I mean, there are a couple ironies here, Cornell. Number one, they would be ruling a country that would still be substantially black. And since we know anti-woke just means anti-black, what would they do with those poor people who'd be stuck there in their world if you really separated it? And number two, by their own definition, their states are takers. They claim they don't like the federal government and they don't like takers. Their own states are wholly dependent on the federal government for survival. So by their own metrics, they're already the ones who are in the moral wrong.
Well, it's absurd, Joy. And I think what they would have to do is, quite frankly, what they were already doing in many of these red states, and that is making it harder and harder for people of color to vote and to have political power. right? My father and my family is from rural North Carolina, and one thing my father and always talked about was growing up is that in the South, blacks and whites could always get along. It was just became a problem when blacks wanted power. And I think that that continues to be true right now, is that you would have to see even more draconian measures to sort of disenfranchise and take away black political power, even more so than you do right now. But let's take this out. Let's push this out further. Is that Marjorie Taylor Greene is and many of her friends, with all due respect, they're not even Republicans anymore. They're Confederates.
Yeah.
I went back for the State of the Union. I went back and looked at State of the Union speeches by presidents, and even Ronald Reagan talked about the ideal of Republicans and Democrats have to get together to move a legislation that benefits all of America and put aside partisanship.
Okay, so I love this guy. He's more or less on a roll. One bump in the road that I want to correct. As we just went over, Ronald Reagan spoke to those things, but that is just the mask. 1982 is when that consent decree was put in place. Reagan was every bit as for every shady tactic as possible. He was just a better salesman to the general public. He was better at convincing folks in the suburbs that they weren't voting against black people's interests necessarily if they were voting Republican. I think it is obvious now. I think at this point in history, now if you walk into the ballot booth and you vote for R under that column, you have to do so knowing that you are choosing to harm black people in exchange for whatever you think you're going to benefit for that vote. And by the way, you're not going to get the benefit that you think you are for that vote. But even if you do, at this point, there is no way you can do that without acknowledging that the exchange is you are also harming black folks. Plain and simple. But it has always been that way. 100% of the GOP's existence has been detrimental to black folks.
This is not even a party of Ronald Reagan anymore. This is no longer what I could see as a legitimate Republican Party. When you start talking about
detrimental to black folks and also seditionists,
dividing the country up and breaking the country up, you're a Confederate. You're no longer a Republican.
You know what's interesting, though, Matthew, my poor team has been forced to hear about this all day, but I feel like what's happening is sort of a coddling of the conservative mind. The conservatives don't have the confidence that their ideas can be sold on the basis of presenting them just as ideas. And so they've decided we can't convince people to do what we want and to live by our particular religious dictums. So we're going to tell the federal government, enforce it. I don't like this book, ban it. I don't like drag shows, make them illegal. The things that I personally feel uncomfortable with, I don't feel confident that I can convince people to come to my side. So I need the power of the federal government to ban the things that make me uncomfortable. That to me strikes me as a sort of intellectual collapse and a sense of defeat.
Well, Joy, I'm really glad you brought this point up because I've been thinking about this a lot, all of us have been observers or in politics for decades in this course of this. I can't remember a time when one political party or the leaders of the political party abandoned persuasion.
Yeah.
Abandon persuasion as a mode of leadership. What they've decided is, just like you said, they can't persuade a majority of America to move in a certain direction, which is where they want to go, which in my view, and I've said this before, is a form of Christian nationalism they want to establish here. So
it's not just his view. It's it's what they've stated. Marjorie Taylor Greene has stated it. Tucker Carlson, propagandist for the GOP and MAGA, has spoken out in favor of Christian nationalism. it's out there. He doesn't have to say, this is my opinion. That's a statement of fact, my friend.
So what they do is, since they can't persuade and they no longer want to persuade, they go to force. And every single leader that's emerged, Donald Trump, DeSantis, others, it's not an art of persuasion. It's an art of force. And that's where we are. And when you when you abandon persuasion and you go to force, then democracy is frayed and is broken. And when your major political party no longer believes in persuasion.
Yeah. When a major political party no longer believes in persuasion, what's the answer? Make that political party no longer major. Kick them out. You got to talk to your GOP friends. There's a couple of ways we are going to chip away at the Republican Party. Look at the Republican Party as two factions: GOP, which were and now I'm talking about voters, so let me be very specific here. GOP voters, who were the soccer moms who didn't really pay attention to politics that closely, watched Fox News occasionally, and believed that they were voting for fiscal responsibility when they voted for Republicans. To be clear, they also have never been good with money because their goal has been to bleed America for their own profit. So, of course, they weren't good with money. But the GOP voters who bought that as a concept, we will be siphoning off them by highlighting this for them. If you are voting for Republicans, you are voting against America. You're voting against the United States. Literally, United States. You are voting against that. Make sure they know that. Doesn't matter if it's a soft-spoken, sort of middle of the road, slightly right-leaning, yada yada yada. If you are giving them votes in Congress, control over a state, control over a school board, you are putting your vote towards making your vote irrelevant. Approach GOP voters like that. Because that would scare them. It should scare them because it's true. MAGA, we've talked about in other streams, and it's less relevant here. MAGA, you approach it from attacking the oligarchy, but that is a conversation for another time. If you've got reasonable Republican voters in your life and you want to sway them away from voting against democracy, A, you can show them that clip. B, you can show them this. I do want Joy to. Yeah, let's just go to this. You can show them this right chaw. States most dependent on the federal government. I have a link to this article. It breaks it down. But here they are. The darker blue, ironically, I wish they hadn't done that. Darker blue represents more dependency. And wouldn't you have a gander? I want to point out, look how dark, green, sort of halfway in between Michigan is. Bear in mind, Michigan was horribly gerrymandered until 2018. This data, I believe, goes up till 2019, 2021, somewhere in there. Michigan will. If you keep watching this, it will lighten and lighten and lighten as time goes on because the state is no longer gerrymandered. Show this to the GOP voters that believe it's the party of fiscal responsibility. Show this to the folks that believe Republicans run things better. They don't. Demonstrably, they don't.
They're like missionaries. They're like religious missionaries who use torture as their form of conversion.
Inquisition.
Because they actually don't have
crusaders.
They're more like the crusaders. Absolutely. And Cornell, that is the one way to turn even more people away.
We need to come up with a less cool word, though, than crusaders, because they don't have that cool knight credibility. F crusaders, for the record, but still.
Oh, I think this is when she said that, and when the Republican leadership roundly did not come out and condemn it, I thought, my God, and I hate to think this way, but it's also, Joy, a political opportunity. Because look, there's a whole amount of research that some that I've been involved with that shows Americans are actually really concerned about another civil war in this country. And they don't want another civil war in this country. And the vast majority of Americans still hold on to the hope that even as divided as we are, we have more in common than not, and that we are stronger together. And I like the ideal of Joe Biden going into re-election as standing, and by the way, his speech that he gave in Eastern Europe, I thought was brilliant, because he talked about democracy, and he talked about standing up for democracy, and he talked about taking on the autocrats. And if this Confederate Party that is now emerging on the right is going to be the party of Putin and autocracy and anti-democracy against democracy, they are handing Joe Biden and Republicans an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to break it to Marge, but her state would be with the Union. Has she been to Atlanta lately? Y'all staying in a red state no more, Mama.
She's going to be one of the children. She's going to be one of the children that's divorced, left without a home.
Left without a listen. Matthew Dowd and Cornell Belcher, thank you both very much.
As they concluded themselves in the end there. And I should have given them more faith. It is a political opportunity. And you shouldn't say, I feel bad about this, but it's a political opportunity. No, it's a political opportunity because the truth is apparent. The neat thing about this, let me tell you in one sentence my political journey. In college, I thought I might be a libertarian. And then I looked at how that's worked out. No libertarian policy has ever been good. In the United States, libertarian means something very different. The left wing lives in the realm of facts. And we do get political opportunities every time right-wingers step too far and give us an opportunity to present facts to make a case. They've done that here. It's real easy. Just make it clear to those soccer moms that we got to convince to stop voting against their own interests, against everybody's interests. Just make it clear to them what is at stake and what they can do about it. I think we're going to find within the next decade that the conservatives are now Democrats and the progressives are the new lefties. We're going to be taking refugees from the GOP because it cannot continue now that America has, to their chagrin, woken up.